Good evening and welcome to the regular City Council meeting for the City of St. Peter. It's Monday, December 12th at 7 p.m. We are now called to order. Would all rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First up on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Everybody has a copy of the packet in front of them. Are there any revisions or corrections to the agenda as distributed? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is approved as distributed. Next up, approval of the minutes. The minutes are printed on pages 6 through 8 of the packet. Are there any revisions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes as distributed signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. First up on our agenda, we have a public hearing regarding Park Row, South 3rd Street to South Washington Avenue Improvement Project. The process for our public hearing is printed on page 9 of the packet, and we'll begin with a staff presentation, followed by time for public comment. And we have Pete and Jeff here to do the staff presentation. Oh, we are, let's see, and we are opening our public hearing at 7:01 p.m.
Madam Mayor and City Council, before I turn it over to Jeff to summarize the project, I just wanted to recap a little bit. As you're aware, we met back in November and talked about the feasibility of the project. A report was given by city staff at that time, and we are at the phase now where we are at the public hearing portion of this. And I'll turn it over to Jeff so that he can comment on the project.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Mayor and City Council members, the improvement hearing is one of those one of the parts of the assessments involving assessing project cost to the benefiting property owners. So this hearing that we've got before us tonight is one of those processes. So far, the council has taken action to adopt or accept the feasibility report and call for the hearing. So tonight's the hearing.
These microphones don't actually broadcast sound through the room, but if you could speak up a bit.
Tony, can you do something about that?
Yeah, I can turn up the amp.
Give us just a second.
Thank you.
We'll do the best we can.
All right, thank you.
We'll try to talk louder too.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Okay, so our proposed improvements that we're looking at are Park Row between South 3rd Street and South Washington Avenue here in the city of St. Peter. The improvements include removing all existing curb and gutter, all the existing bituminous pavement, some non-compliant ADA walkway, ped ramps in the intersections, roadway pavement, and then also doing some utility work, which I'll get into here in a little bit. All are in poor condition. Roadway is in such shape that it doesn't really justify, or it's not even feasible anymore to continue seal coating it. It's just, it doesn't pay. So the surface has been there for a number of years, probably at least, I think, from what I researched, well over 30 years, probably somewhere near 50 from what I recall. Curb and gutter is offset in various locations. Poor drainage occurring because of that curb and gutter offset. It's also various heights. 8 inches was common. It's called a high back curb. That was common in the 1950s, 1960s, but no longer is common simply because we no longer have horses. Well, even back then we never had horses and buggies, but what happens now when you get out of your car, you tend to hit that curb if you're nearby, if you get out of your car and try to approach the home. So we're proposing to put a shallow or a shorter curb and gutter in there. Let's see, while the roadway surface is proposed to be removed, the curb and gutter and all that, we're also proposing to do some utility improvements while that roadway is removed, and some of the utility improvements include replacing vitrified clay pipe services. Those are for in residences that have a vitrified clay pipe service. Those are, vitrified clay is no longer used. It's very durable, but the pipe that was installed is susceptible to root intrusion and also, for plugging, and also a lot of I&I, which goes to our wastewater treatment plant and is untreated. So additional cost does come up from the city when they treat fresh water, groundwater. So some sanitary sewer improvements are proposed for those. Service improvements are, and then also water services. We've got a few water services on the project that are in an area of only 5 feet deep or so. So those are also proposed to be replaced. Existing services that are PVC are not proposed to be replaced. Water services that are, I think, greater than 5+ feet deep, not susceptible to freezing. They're all copper. Those aren't proposed to be replaced at this time. So by replacing the shallow ones, you're basically removing that or minimizing the ability for the service to freeze in the future. We've had a few cases, I believe, over the years where we've had a few water services in that area freeze. No water main work is proposed, mainline work, no sanitary sewer mainline work is proposed at this time. Both of those are in good condition. City staff has televised the sanitary sewer and found that to be in good condition. If it's required, if we do see that there's issues in the future, it's something that could be lined at a fairly reasonable rate. Let's see. Storm sewer would be the only other thing that we're looking at doing improvements to, and that would be removing and replacing some of the catch basins. That's the devices that take storm water from the street and drain it away. So we're proposing to remove some of those structures that are in poor shape and then replace the pipe between the structure and the manhole. No mainline storm sewer is proposed to be replaced. That was installed in 1974-ish, somewhere in there, and it's concrete and is in still very good condition. So just the structures over time, they tend to get, the castings tend to get beat up. The rings, the adjusting rings for the castings, they really tend to get beat up. So we're proposing to replace those. Total project costs are estimated to be about $748,000, of which about $380,000 would be assessed. That's all based on the city assessment policy. Assessments would vary anywhere, about $40 per linear foot for roadway improvements. I believe about $30 per linear foot for curb and gutter. Storm sewers is about 23% per square foot, but $10,000 an acre. I mean, most of the lots there are less than a half acre, much more, quarter acres in the size.
I apologize, Jeff. Is there something we can do about the feedback?
I think Tony's working on it right now.
Sorry, Jeff.
That's no problem. Okay.
Go ahead, Jeff.
All right, great. And then if you do have if a residence does have a sanitary sewer water service that needs to be replaced, those are estimated to be about $3,500 each. That's for the portion between the main and the right-of-way line. Residents do have an option if they do want to replace their service. Let's say they have a clay service from between the right-of-way line and the home yet that they want to get replaced. They can do that. As part of the project, that would be an additional cost that would be assessed to that individual property. Or they can choose to hire a local contractor to do that also. So with that, the improvements are necessary and cost effective and feasible. And I guess from the standpoint of engineering standpoint, best made as proposed. So with that, I don't have anything else to add.
So if I can, Pete, the next step in the process, if the council moved forward into the two things that are on the agenda, one of which is to engage the engineers to do the rest of the work to go out for bids, and then the second is to order improvement. It really doesn't order the improvement yet because we don't have bids.
Right.
We don't have better numbers to tell anyone. So tell us what's next.
Right. So we do order the improvements will be the next thing after the public hearing today. We'll take There'll be some action on later in the agenda for those two processes, as you described, Todd. And then what happens is after we've ordered the improvement and asked the engineer to do the work of putting plans and specifications together, we go out and get bids and pull that information in, and then we recalculate to see where we stand on the project.
Sure. And then we inform property owners what the numbers might be, and the
Correct.
council can make decisions then relative to what assessment is in place
Yep.
based on what their policy is, or do something different related to the policy.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jeff and
Yep.
Pete. Next up, we have time on the agenda for public comment. Is there any member of the public who'd like to speak toward this agenda item? Okay. We'll just need your name and your address for the record, and then you'll have 5 minutes.
Sure. My name is Melanie Marty. I'm the property owner at 520 Park Row. Can you hear me okay, everybody?
yeah.
All
Yep.
right. Like I said, I'm Melanie Marty. 520 Park Row is where I live with my 14-year-old daughter. I'm a small business owner, Harbor Home and Gifts, which opened its doors here in St. Peter 3 months ago. I'm also a nurse up at the hospital here in St. Peter. Essentially, I'm here to request that if there's a possibility to reevaluate my estimated amount, I'd like to pursue that. I'd fully expect that I'm willing to pay an amount, but I question if the benefit to my property value really is at least equal to the $17,800 I'm expected to pay. I'd like a special appraisal if possible to find the answer to that issue. I'd like to request the evidence to support that my property's value will increase by at least $17,800. I'm concerned that Section 5 isn't more specific. That's the part that talks about the sidewalk area. My 520 Park Row is in the middle of a block, and it's 72.5 feet. And I, at first, was thinking that all of that sidewalk would be replaced, but I'm under the understanding at this point that it's just a short section that will be replaced. So I'd like to, if possible, have more information on that, and I think I can talk to Jim about that. But just the specifics just weren't clear to me on that, so it's not clear. This isn't about facts and figures, this is just me talking from my heart. I'd like it to be known that I'm very frustrated with the timing of this all. Being right before Christmas, of course, it's the busiest time of year for everyone, especially for nursing, especially for a small business, especially for my small business that just opened 3 months ago. Essentially for me, it's the worst timing possible. 2 years ago, it would have been okay. 3 or 4 years from now, it would be okay, but right now, it's a very difficult time to add any expenses. I feel like during this most busy and stressful time, I feel like I've been forced to kind of scramble to try to learn the new assessment language. I'm a single head of household, and it makes it difficult because it's just not, my mind isn't wired that way. To learn that is difficult in a short time. And enough to make an informed decision, it is making it difficult. So I just feel like we can do better with the figure. I hope we can find some room to move on the total amount of the $17,800. Like I said before, I'd love to have some kind of a special appraisal to see if my property value will really go up by at least the $17,800 that is estimated. I'd love that evidence to support that increase of the property value, and I'm going to talk to Jim too about more specifics on that Section 5. So as a mom, as the owner of a new business, every dollar counts for me. I just hope that we can find some kind of a way to bring that number down to a more feasible amount. So that's all I wanted to say. I do appreciate the time that you took to listen to me today, and I thank you very much. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there any other member of the public who'd like to address us on this matter? We can get your name and address for the
Sure,
record.
it's Amy Hansen, 200 South Fifth Street. Our main address is on Fifth Street. We have 122 feet on Park Row. And it's my understanding, we aren't having any of our mainline sidewalk replaced at all. And to me, it's hard, like Mel said, that number 5 is hard to justify the mainline sidewalk not being, nothing done to it and still having a $10,000 assessment on that part for a total of almost $21,000. I agree with Mel, we need to know what the city has as evidence to prove that our property will be increasing in value by the $21,000. I guess I don't know what there is out there. It just seems to be high. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else like to address the council? Hearing nothing further. Okay.
I'm Jay Brockman. I live at 525 Park Row. I was assessed about $26,000. I just purchased this house about a year ago. I know the previous owner had that piece of sewer line replaced. Previously, he was charged an assessment of $18,000 for that work. You know, I sat here and I heard these guys say, you know, it needs it, this road needs it, it's 50 years old. There's no way to fix this road any cheaper. And, you know, I think that's probably not true. I think they're just in a hurry to tear up something and spend a bunch of money and do a project that doesn't need to be done right away. I think the road is pretty good for what I use it for, which is getting to and from my house. You know, so there's curb issues, there's other issues, apparently. I just think that number is way too high. You know, $26,000 over 15 years with a, you know, essentially a 0% interest rate would be about $166 monthly I will be paying for the next 15 years, right? And we just had a baby. We have a 5-month-old. So we've gone from being a 2-income house to a 1-income house. You know, I have student loans I need to pay back, credit card debt. You know, we're trying to build a garage on the house, on the lot, and build a little kitchen area up top. And we were told, no, you can't run water directly from your house. This is a state statute. You know, you have to connect it to a main line, which is all the way past Washington. So they have to tear up Washington and run about 130 feet of conduit, you know, into the earth. And that would cost about $28,000. But no, you can't run it, you know, 12 feet or whatever to your house. That's against the rules. So I just feel like, you know, I'm being taxed enough as it is. You know, $166 a month is really going to affect me. So, you know, I hope that we can put this project off or find a cheaper way to do it rather than tearing up the whole street. And if people need their, you know, their lines replaced, then they can replace them when that time comes. You know, I don't think that we need to do this right away. You know, and I think half of the price being assessed, you know, the homeowners being assessed half the price of this work being done is, seems like a lot to me. You know, I think the number should be lower if it were to be assessed. About 20% is what I understand the law is for this type of special assessment. So, 20% would be, I'd be paying essentially 40% of what I'm paying. So 40% of $166 a month is what my new assessment or my new payment would then be, which, that's a lot of money to me. $26,000 is a whole lot of money to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to comment?
Hello.
Hi.
Brandon Hugdahl, 416 Park Row. The only question I have is kind of like the interest rates and when that will be addressed. It wasn't really clear at the open house, so that's just where I kind of want to get a little more clarity. And on top of that, I know depending on the amount and the years, if you're with, let's say if you're close enough to either 10 years or 15 years, if there's going to be flexibility if you're, let's say, $500 short, So that would be my only concern, so thank you.
Thank you.
So, Madam Mayor, if you want, since it was a question, I'm happy to answer the question about interest rates. So typically that's set at the time that the assessment occurs, so that's a number of months away if the project moves forward. So the policy that the council has in place now is it's 1% over prime.
Okay.
So whatever that is plus 1% is what's articulated in the policy.
Okay.
And the council has flexibility on some of these related to timelines. There's a provision within the policy that allows them some flexibility. So as things evolve more, there'll be opportunity for more answers that are more specific to each property owner.
Okay, and will we be contacted with that?
Oh,
or
for sure.
it?
Oh, yeah, you'll
Okay.
get notice. There's a number of notice processes as a part of this and additional hearings. And as I mentioned earlier, when the staff presentation was going on, just because the council takes action tonight, that
Right.
doesn't get it built, and that doesn't mean you're assessed yet.
Okay.
There's a number of other steps that have to occur before that.
Okay,
For that.
thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else like to address the council at this time? All right, seeing no one further, we are going to close at 7:22 p.m. Thanks, everybody who took the time to come out and to speak as well. Next up on our agenda, we have time for visitors to address the council on any agenda items. Is there any member of the audience who'd like to address the council on any agenda item? Hearing none, general visitor comments. Is there any member of the audience who'd like to address the council on any matter whatsoever? Hearing none, we will move on to approval of the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins with a memo on page 10 and concludes with the resolution on pages 27 through 29 of the packet. The consent agenda includes the following items. The new employee appointments approved at the wages indicated. David Gunderson, Parks Foreman. John Arden, I need to get out my reading glasses. Let's see. John Ardenson, wastewater operator. Norman Johnson, groundskeeper. The following city council advisory boards and commissions are approved for the terms indicated. Hospital Commission, John Lammert and Blake Kumbelek. Housing and Redevelopment Authority, Harry Jennis. Tourism and Visitors Bureau, Aaron Schwab and Robert Sandine. Parks and Rec Advisory Board, Sam Mendoza. Planning and Zoning Commission, Matthew Larson and Ben Griffith. Library Board, Marianne Hansen, Alan Bray, and Don Fuller. The Heritage Preservation Commission, David McGuire. The council members shall be assigned to the following advisory board and liaison agreements as printed in the packet. I will spare you by not reading all of those. And the following renewal licenses, which I will also not read in full, but they cover tobacco, amusement device, show license, jukebox, dance license, solid waste hauler, and temporary gambling, as well as the schedule of disbursements for November 24th through December 7th. Is there any discussion about any item on the consent agenda? Emily?
Yeah, I had a question. It's on page 12 about Norman Johnson. I was just curious if, since landscaping is a part of his job description, if he has any experience with native plants.
So let me respond to that one. Based on where we are at and based on the job description, this is not a position that would necessarily at this stage be doing the planting plan for like the medians downtown or in parks or things. Typically that's done by someone else, and folks that are in this position are expected to be able to read some of the plans and be able to execute on that. So if the question really is, does anyone that's appointed here as a groundskeeper have expertise in native plants? They do not. But they are expected, again, to be able to read plans, to be able to execute on a plan. And as members may know now, oftentimes we're working with landscape architects and others that have experience in these types of things that really provide the overall plan and direction for that.
Right, thanks.
Great
Todd.
question, thank you.
Any other questions about the consent agenda? Hearing none, the resolution again is on pages 27 through 29 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Sarsfield.
Aye.
Councilmember Bluefett.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Ram.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Moving on to unfinished business, adoption of an ordinance modifying City Code MS4 stormwater regulations and a resolution authorizing summary publication. So we are going to be considering an ordinance, and if that's approved, a resolution.
Correct. So if I can jump in, Madam Mayor, that's exactly right. This is an item that staff asked you to table from your last meeting. As you may recall, posted notice on your website was provided, as is in accordance with state statute, for any modification to your ordinance. That was requested because we had not had time to do the codification process of this yet, but that is now completed. And so Pete and his team are here to further discuss if you have any questions related to the ordinance specifically. And so Jim was at your workshop, well, a few cycles back, and talked, I think we talked extensively because this is quite a long ordinance. That brings up why there's the summary publication. We're required under statute that if we want to publish the ordinance in summary, that the council approves that summary, and so a draft, that resolution, is included in your packet. Frankly, this is a money-saving issue in that the whole ordinance is published on your website and is available at my office and other locations, but to publish the entire ordinance is expected to cost more than $15,000. And so we believe that a summary publication and having it on our website and available by other means is reasonable and able to be used by the public at that cost savings. So with that, Pete, I'll turn it over to you and Jim to discuss kind of some of the big picture changes that are going on and be available for questions if the council has any.
Well, Madam Mayor and City Council, Jim and I are going to tag team on this, and Jim's going to talk a little bit about the changes that are involved with this ordinance. As you're aware, we've gone through the MS4 cycle now several times, and so as we have gone through this, we have completed updates every year, or every 4 years when the permit comes through. One of the things that Jim's going to talk to you about today is getting compliance with the state's stormwater manual and how the state's looking at stormwater improvements in the future, and that's the basis for our improvements here. Jim, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, Council. We were, of course, in 2020, we had to meet Minnesota state regs brought down by the feds, and so in 21, MPCA said that we had 12 months to comply to the new regulations, and that's where that process came in, where city staff working with engineering staff and basically redoing Article X. And I got like 6 or 7 points that are highlights of what those changes are, and I'll just cover those very briefly. Probably the biggest one, overall change, is in the land disturbing permit portion. Currently, we have 120 square feet, so basically a 10 by 12 area, not in the right-of-way, would need a permit for land disturbing. We're changing that now to 4,356 square feet, so basically a 66 by 66 square foot area. And that does not involve anything that's in the right of way. Anything that's done in the right of way still requires a land use permit for basically any work that's done. This does match kind of what is standard in other Minnesota permits. Less monitoring by our staff that really has no impact on soils that are going to get to the stormwater that are eventually going to get to the Minnesota River. So there's really no financial impact since we do not charge for those permits. And we still have the authority to monitor anything that goes on in the city and make corrections if we need to, even if there's not a permit or not a permit required to be pulled. So that's probably the biggest change in the whole ordinance. The rest of it, there's a section there reducing, Article X. It doesn't reduce any other requirements in the ordinance. So basically, language is clarifying that is not going to change any other language in the ordinance. And then it kind of clarifies what a project management plan is. And that is 1 acre or more of land being disturbed has to have that project management plan. And that's a NPDES permit requirement. And then it kind of explains the difference between that and a stormwater master plan, which would be like the Brown Street Basin type, where it's already planned ahead of time where stormwater is going to go. So if somebody's coming in, they're developing an acre or more, and there's no master plan, they still need to do a stormwater project plan. One of the other big things is that we're making sure that the city ordinance is as stringent as the permit by MPCA, but not more stringent than the MPCA requirements. And then other miscellaneous changes, just a couple more to cover. We want to make sure that the ordinance refers to the current MS4 that's in effect, the date that somebody's applying for a permit. In the past, we spelled out a lot of that information on stormwater ponds, how to build them, how to create them, how to engineer them. And now that is all back into the MPCA permit, and that's where people go to refer to the information they need and not into the ordinance.
So that's the manual that we're talking about. And what Jim had mentioned was in our previous ordinance, we would say your slope needs to be this, your clear spaces are this, your outlets are this, and now that's in the manual.
Yep. So when the permit changes, and then we'd have to go back and change the ordinance. Now it's just referred to the permit that's in place. So they'll make it a lot easier going down the road. And I guess the last big thing is an added portion about de-icing, to make sure that they're eventually are all complying with de-icing regulations. They say de-icing because it's mostly salt, to make sure that they're in covered areas, they're in impervious sites. There's care in transferring and cleanup when you are moving material around. And then they also has a deadline on there of 2025. Unless you're making changes, then you have to make the modifications as soon as you make the changes. But if you don't make any changes, everybody has to be compliant by October 1, 2025. So that just gives everybody a little bit of time to meet those new regulations. So that's what I had for highlights. If there's any questions, I'll certainly try to answer.
There is a resolution on page 32 that we'd be asking you to authorize.
Carrie.
So for the de-icer regulations, we're, adding language regarding those regulations, but do we have to change any of our practices and how we stored?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have to lead by example on this situation, and then we'll have to work with our customers that come and get sand and salt from us. Sand isn't so bad. The salt mixture would require some changes as far as proximity to a storm sewer, whether it's covered or not covered, a lot of different rules. And when, like Jim had mentioned, we have until October of 2025 to do that. It'll probably take us about 3 years to get to that point with just city operations. So we do have to change how we do things first, and we will budget for those accordingly.
So out of Public Works, if we were to go out there now, it's kind of in a pile, but they're requesting a cover, or, and I'm assuming because that if it rains, then it drains.
Wash down the storm sewer.
Yeah, okay, and we have until 2025 to
Right.
make those
So-
changes. I had a question, Todd, about why on earth it costs $15,000 to publish the full publication. What goes into that?
It's the amount of inches that are in the St. Peter Herald, and that's the cost for this amount of material. Remember, the full ordinance is approximately 28 or 29 pages of material, so even if that's printed really, really small, that's a
Yeah,
lot of
wow.
column inches within the St. Peter Herald. It's not unusual for us to do a summary publication for an ordinance that's over 4 or 5 pages long. And again, not all of this ordinance is being changed. This isn't a whole new ordinance. The codification provides for the areas that are seeing change.
So if I wanted access to this, I can find it on the website, or I can go to the city administrator office and
Yep.
request it?
Yeah, and in fact, even though it hasn't been approved yet, the draft of this is included in your packet. A draft of this was included in your workshop packet previously. And so we provided notice that's appropriate. And as you know, in the spring, we have educational opportunities for, typically it's contractors that may or may not participate in that, who do a lot of land disturbing activities, or maybe landscape companies that also do snow plowing and things like that. But some of you know, we generally have almost no one show up. They learn about it through other sources or have training in other ways.
It's very interesting, though,
Yeah.
if anyone wants to participate, it's interesting to see how we attempt to protect our waterways.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Additional questions, Dustin?
Do you have any idea how many businesses or residents will be impacted with the new ordinance
As far as de-icing.
regarding the
roads,
de-icing? Sorry.
There'll be some, because it will pertain to anybody that stores, usually gas stations store salt on site. So those will have to be monitored, make sure that they're covered, or usually they're on impervious surfaces already. But just make sure that they're not, anything's not washing. A lot of times you find bags that are ripped open, and then that stuff washes through the storm, so that just has to be monitored. And I think once that word gets out, it's in the permit, so it's gonna be second nature once everybody gets word of it.
We don't-
But there's several.
We have offered educational opportunities just to work with homeowners when they're applying salt for their own driveways. And so that's important for the public meetings that we have, is that either it should be recorded so that we can communicate a little better with everybody that's looking at that. There isn't an enforcement tool to go out, and it's mostly trying to educate the homeowner how to apply that salt. We will have a couple of customers that get salt from us that we'll have to work with, whether it's they come to our site and our site's improved, or they improve their sites, because right now there's a couple of them that will need to be improved.
Additional questions? Hearing no further questions, the ordinance is printed in the packet. It begins on page 32. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Ramp.
Aye.
Councilmember Sherstrom.
Aye.
The ordinance is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Under the same piece of business, we are going to consider the resolution, which begins on page 40 of the packet, authorizing publication of the title summary of ordinance number, fill in the blank,
Yep.
third series. Any discussion on this? Todd, I think, has already explained it fairly well.
Hopefully, if there's any questions, I'm happy to try and answer.
Questions for Todd? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Ramp.
Aye.
Councilmember Sherstrom.
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Moving on to new business, our first item of new business is the adoption of resolutions adopting 2022 tax levy and 2023 budget. That begins with a memo on page 42 of the packet.
As you see, Mayor, members, Sally is here to provide some explanation. I think our goal for tonight, since you talked about this a number of times, is to hit 5 or 6 kind of bullet points, some high points, so that you're aware of process and where this is at. And certainly if there are any additional questions, we're happy to do our best to answer those. Sally's going to tell you that if you don't take action tonight, you got to by the end of the year. And so that would require a special meeting, and that's okay too, if that's where you want to be. But I'll leave it to Sally to hit on some of the more important points for you. And again, if there's any questions, we'll do our best to answer.
Okay. Thanks, Sally.
Mayor Noel, City Council. As Todd said, we're here tonight to ask approval of two resolutions, one for the 2022 tax levy, which is payable in 2023, and then a resolution approving budgets for the general fund, SPPA, library, community center, special revenue, and debt funds. The memo begins on page 42, and it's from page 42 to 49. And then on pages 50 to 64, there's tables and graphs. And detailed budgets are on pages 165 to 144 of the packet. So people watching on TV, there's a lot of detail out in the packet. So if you want to dig deep into the numbers, call up the packets and go for it and have fun. But as Todd said, we're going to talk about 5 or 6 different items of which I feel are the most important as we've gone through this 4 or 5 times in workshops and the preliminary levy. The final levy for 2022 for taxes payable in 2023 needs to be certified on or before December 30th of 2022. And as Todd said, since this is your last regular meeting for 2022, if you decide not to approve tonight, we'll have to have a special meeting between now and December 30th. The final levy amount we are asking for approval is $3,825,973, which is the same amount that you approve for your preliminary levy. And as you know, when we set the preliminary levy at the end of September, the number cannot be, the dollar amount cannot increase. We can go down if we go through and look at things, we can reduce the levy, but we cannot increase it. So we're where we need to be. A breakout of the levy in detail is on page 50 of the different items we're levying for. Projected tax capacity increase from 22 to 23 is at $8,022,612, which is an increase of $1,168,910, or 17.4% increase year over year, and that's calculated by the county. That increase is higher than I've seen. I'm not a 30-year employee. I've been here about 5, but that's the highest I've seen. But that's increased across residential, commercial, industrial, all areas. So homeowners, we're seeing about a 13.1% increase on home as an average for home ownership.
And Mayor and members, we did include, that was a question from the workshop, and so we did include some extra information in the resolution from the county who sets those rates, and they provided us some good detail related to where the majority of those increases occurred.
So anyway, the total levy increase is $300,488, or 8.52% for additional needs within the city, mainly driven by wages and benefits for employees. As you'll see later in the packet, there's a wage increase proposed for non-union employees, but then benefits, our health insurance had a cap of 7.5%, so our medical increased 7.5% year over year. The city tax levy is decreasing to 47.69 versus 51.57. What this means is a property owner, if the property value of a $150,000 house did not change from 2022, taxes would decrease by $48.99 year over year. So we are seeing a decrease in that. The general fund budget and fund balances are found on page 51 of the packet. The 2022 budget is not balanced. We're using reserves of about $380,000 of $380,346. The proposed budget fund reserve will be at 47.1, or $419,984. And this is a decrease of about $22,000 from the 2022 budget. We have some budgeted equipment certificate purchases. We have a tandem truck for $295,000, HVAC for this community center for $275,000. Again, the community center is 20 years old, so we're starting to see some maintenance on some of the equipment here at the community center. And there's $90,000 in for pool painting. As always, these budgeted items will come back to you for approval, anything over $25,000 for our purchasing policy. The enterprise fund, which is water, wastewater, stormwater, electric, continues to transfer 6.5% to the general fund to help cover costs. No planned system-wide increases for rec fees. Budgeted, the library program and services are remaining the same. We did increase the levy by $78,568 for additional needs for the library. That's running at a deficit. And again, the library's 20 years old, so we're starting to see some wear and tear on carpet and different things. Not that we're replacing them next year, but trying to build the reserves. And we aren't seeing a whole lot of increases from the county to help support the library. So we're working on getting that up, and the last time we increased the levy for the library was 2018. So we're asking for some increases there. Operating expenses will still be about $83,000 higher than revenues. And again, employee costs and insurance are the biggest driver. The community center, good news is the debt's been retired on this since 2021, but we are putting 170 of the levy that was paying for the debt back into the community center to help support ongoing maintenance and different issues going through. The general fund summary shows a 2023 budget reserve balance of $4,419,984, or 47.1%. Again, our targeted reserve range is 35 to 50, so we're sitting very well in that, and it's where we want to be. We will keep updating this as 2023 goes on. Again, we're asking for the resolution on pages 145 through 146 to approve the final levy of $3,825,973.
Thanks, Sally. Anything to add, Todd?
No, maybe the only thing that I would add is that, as you see within your packet, you'll see a couple of pie charts, and they explain what amount of the city's general fund budget is funded by local property taxpayers and what amount is funded by local government aid. As you know, local government aid is a significant amount of your general fund budget. And so local government aid has not kept pace with inflation. And so that's certainly a challenge for communities like St. Peter going forward. Without getting too political, we'd encourage people to encourage their state legislators to ensure that there's additional funding within local government aid, because we use that dollar for dollar to buy down property taxes. And so again, as we mentioned at the beginning, there's some great information, even if you're not a spreadsheet person, even if you're more a visual learner with graphs and those type of things, there's some great information, not just about the 22-year or the 23-year, but a little bit of history as well. So we'd encourage people to watch that. But again, the information is included in your packet. First of all, we're looking for approval of the levy and then approval of the general fund budget.
Questions for Sally or for Todd? Carrie?
Well, we've talked about this and looked at this a number of times, but at the last workshop, Councilmember Pettis had asked the question and requested the county breakdown, because how we've been looking at this is estimated increase citywide is 17.5%.
Yeah.
And seeing this information, residential is around 13%, and there's different breakdowns. I don't know how soon the county can make this information available to us, but might that be something in the future we want to use to adjust the city tax comparison sheet, just so we can understand the impact, or maybe help others understand the impact?
So that tax comparison sheet, the math for that works differently, and it's based on tax rate and overall levy. So those changes in estimated market value that you see, those percentage changes, while important, don't make that table look any different than it does now. I wish I had a better way to explain that without a whiteboard, but the reason that information might be of value to the council, the information being what types of properties saw the most property value increase, is because it does change the distribution of taxes. Let me use a very basic explanation of how this works. Property taxes within St. Peter, how we charge them is like a apple pie. And various segments of your community, residential has a slice, commercial has a slice, industrial has a slice. Actually, there are over 30 different property tax classifications within the state of Minnesota and therefore in St. Peter. So this pie is split up into 33 different little pieces. And when my grandma made apple pie, she would sprinkle sugar on top of it. And she'd try and distribute it as evenly as possible. That is exactly not how the tax system works. How the tax system works is it distributes the sugar unevenly based on tax rate and estimated market value. And so the information that Sally got from the county related to estimated market value is telling you or trying to say a little bit more about not how much sugar was sprinkled, but how someone's piece of the pie got bigger or someone else's got smaller. So I hope that helps. If not, on our YouTube page, there's a great video blog that explains this in a little bit more detail, and I'd encourage people to go back a few years and find it. I do better with a whiteboard, sorry, but yeah.
How might we use that information in the future the way that?
I don't know that there's a
broken
great, I don't know that there's a great way to utilize that other than to just make people aware that there are changes within their slice of the pie. And so I think that's a value. The calculation on that table works out because it's based on the tax rate and based on your tax classification. So as an example, if you own a house and you're homesteaded, you generally pay approximately a 1% rate on that property, where a commercial property is over 2. So a $100,000 house might pay X, a $100,000 commercial property pays 2X, if that helps. Great question, though.
Yeah, overall, are we still in this position based on the growth that we've seen with businesses in a like 70-30 split based on, you know, tax exempt property and taxable property?
So overall, you've seen additional growth in commercial property valuation that is more based on the data that we receive from the county and they figure out than what residentials have gone up. I think that's a good thing overall and where you want to go. This doesn't directly relate to the amount that you are levying, nor does it directly relate to the amount of the increase of levy. It solely has to do with how property taxes are applied and how big or small the slices of that pie are.
And it certainly relates to how we feel it in St. Peter.
Without a
We're
doubt.
paying our taxes, and even more, I think, you know, for St. Peter and perhaps Northfield, it makes even more sense for our cities to advocate with the state legislature to talk about LGA, as it's not kept up with inflation and the formula hasn't been updated. So I see that as a future in helping provide some relief to taxpayers.
Yeah, and if people have questions in a similar vein or any questions about this, please give me a call or give Sally a call, or certainly there's a process with the county about what your valuation is. There's a separate process for that that they go through and you participate a little in, but really isn't directly related to the tax levy. It's how that levy amount is spread across the various amounts of property.
Right. I think as people look at this process, though, that's what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
We're thinking about the city's goals and what we have and how we can be sustainable in the future, while also attempting to be mindful of how these goals and our effort to be sustainable may impact the folks that are paying their taxes. So.
And I think it's also true the council spends a lot of time reviewing this and going over this, and important decisions are sometimes challenging and take lots of time, energy, and homework. And so that's what you do.
And I appreciate that we get so much time and so many opportunities to talk about this as a council.
Process starts in July. Yeah.
Any additional questions? All right, hearing no further questions, the resolution adopting a final 2022 tax levy collectible in 2023 is on pages 45 and 46 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Ramp,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpston,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. The next resolution we're considering is approving the general fund, special revenue funds, debt service funds, capital funds, and agency funds for the 2023 fiscal year. That is on page 147 of the packet. Sally or Todd, anything to add? Nope.
No, ma'am.
All right. If there any questions from the council? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Ramp,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpston,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye. The resolution is approved. Thank you, Sally. Next up, under new business, is the adoption of ordinance modifying city code regulations concerning hospital purchasing authorization. The memo begins on page 48 of the packet.
Mayor and members, this has been noticed appropriately under the state rules and comes before you based on a discussion really probably now about 4 months ago or so. This discussion occurred as a part of the modifications that the council provided for in your purchase policy. And over the last certainly 25 plus years, the council has deemed it to be appropriate that the purchase policy and the ordinance related to how much the hospital can spend on capital goods or projects without council approval have been parallel. And so as you raised your purchase policy and provided authority at different levels and different levels of review for the city council, following that theory, it's appropriate to modify the ordinance related to the hospital. And what this does, from a practical standpoint, is say that any purchase over $100,000 that the hospital is going to make related to a capital purchase must come before the council for approval before it is purchased. Prior to this point, or if you approve it January 1st, prior to this point, that number, again, was coincident to your purchase policy, which was $50,000. So another way to say that is that if you approve the ordinance, this then follows your purchase policy and moves the hospital's threshold for your approval from $50,000 to $100,000. And that's the modification that's provided as a part of this ordinance.
Let's see. The ordinance is printed on page 149 of the packet. We've discussed this several times. Are there any questions for Todd? Brad?
So Todd, just to clarify, so that people don't think that we're just giving either the hospital or city staff just carte blanche to just go out and spend money. There are still procedures in place requiring getting quotes, a number of quotes and such before a purchase is actually made, and those would be subjected to audit. So it's not a free-for-all.
It is definitely not a free-for-all. The hospital has a finance committee, and they have a purchasing policy and rules that the hospital CEO must follow. And so all of these things are certainly reviewed by your auditors and by the hospital auditors. And that's why you have a set of rules in place for us to follow and make sure that they follow the appropriate procedure. Thank you.
Dustin?
As part of those procedures, will this still go through the hospital board?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, so they have their own purchase policy, and it must be approved based on their policy, but the hospital has latitude related to their finance committee and how the commission wants to handle those types of purchases. Again, this strictly relates to what has to come before the council, what the threshold of that is. And this is an appropriate level. This is $75,000 lower than what the state statute requires. So you guys tighten this much more than what the state statute requires.
Carrie?
To piggyback off of that, I don't think I've ever seen a request of a purchase come through that wasn't also approved by the hospital commission. Would there be any instance where something gets straight to the council?
No, not that I can think of as it relates to hospital operations or capital purchases. I just can't think of anything that would meet that Unless there was some type of natural disaster or emergency or something like that, I just, yeah, nope.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Hearing no further questions, the ordinance before us is on page 149 and 150 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Ram.
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpstra.
Aye.
Councilmember Bluefett.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Just as an aside, you'd asked earlier about the MS4 ordinance, and this ordinance, the size is dramatically smaller, so that's why we don't have a summary publication for this one.
$15,000.
Yeah, so, anyway.
All right, next up, adoption of resolution approving hospital equipment purchase. And I don't even know if I can say this. What's it called, Paula?
I'm going to call it a CFID.
CFID, Genexpert
I'm gonna call-
Molecular Analyzer. I'm glad there's
It's a
somebody.
piece of laboratory equipment.
And you certainly have somebody who knows how to use it, and that's the
We have a
important
whole
part.
department.
All right.
Mayor Noel, City Council members, thank you, first of all, for the modification. And I still have departments that have expensive equipment, so I'm here tonight to request approval to purchase the molecular analyzer for the laboratory. This would be a piece of equipment to replace what we currently have, which will be sunsetting in June of '23. At this point in time, there's no longer manufacturing parts, so if our analyzer were to go down, it would be very difficult to repair that. There's a couple of other things that I think make this advantageous to our patients. Currently, if we are, I'm going to say 3 words that you should be sick of hearing, COVID, flu, and RSV. If we're testing any of our patients for those, it's a swab for each one of those tests with the current analyzer. With the new analyzer, it will be 1 swab. We'll be able to run all 3 of those tests. So that will save us some money in supplies. We'll also save some on the patient side, both comfort and should be a financial savings there. The new analyzer also has additional sensitivity. So currently we are able to test for sensitivity of COVID at 78%. The new analyzer is at 99%. Flu A would be 63% with our current analyzer. That would move to 100% for, I see a typo in here, flu A and flu B, RSV, and group A strep. In addition, we will be able to add some testing that we aren't currently doing. Those would be send-outs for us right now. And those would be Group B strep for the birthing center. We're anticipating that's about 50 tests per year. Other bacterial and trichomonas testing and yeast testing. We did look at other models, but we have a very small space to deal with. Cost and limitations of the testing of other equipment made the Genexpert the preferred equipment for purchase. The Finance Committee and the Hospital Commission has approved the purchase of the new analyzer at a price of $112,796.45, which does include some trade-in dollars, so that's the final cost. There is a 1 year, I just always think when we get to something this expensive, it should be better than that, but it's not. There is a 1-year warranty on the equipment, but it does, we do have either the option to purchase a service plan, or we can add it to our biomed list for the other equipment that we have in the house.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Paula? Brad and then Carrie.
So Paula, I think it just, I mentioned this at the hospital committee meeting. I'm a little disappointed that you don't have an interesting name like the Mindray telemetry monitor like last month, or the last time you were here.
So sorry.
When you're ordering this type of equipment or other equipment, when there's equipment needs, are you experiencing supply chain issues like so many other industries?
I anticipate that there's going to be a delay. It's one of the reasons that we're working ahead and hopefully could still repair if something went down, but I don't anticipate that we'll be able to get this piece of equipment in the next couple of months.
So it might take a few months. It's not a year or 2 years sort of.
Couple months. I won't anticipate a year.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions? The resolution before us on page 152 of the packet calls for approving purchase of a CFID Genexpert molecular analyzer for Rivers Edge Hospital and Clinic. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Sherster?
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat?
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos?
Aye.
Mayor Noel?
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Ram?
Aye.
The resolution is approved.
And again, Mayor members, it's important to remember that this is paid for out of hospital funds.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Paula.
Paula.
All right, next up, adoption of resolutions related to Park Row, South Third Street to South Washington Avenue Improvement Project. And we're going to consider the two resolutions in the packet in reverse order. So we're going to be looking at the resolution on page 157 first, followed by the resolution on page 155.
Mayor members, Pete is here. Pete, do you have anything to add based on the presentation for the public hearing?
Nope, you guys have heard the president's staff presentation. I'm available for questions. And as you mentioned, we are asking that you look at the resolution on page 157 first.
Mayor members, again, if you approve these resolutions, this does not a project get built make. There's still more work to be done, and certainly as you've talked about this at previous meetings, I know that you are concerned about the cost and the value, the relative value of this, and the balance of assessments related to what property owners should pay that abut the improvement and what the rest of the taxpayers within St. Peter should pay or utility ratepayers should pay. So I know there'll be more discussion about that as we move forward, but if you approve this resolution, it sets the wheels in motion to gather more of that data, and there are processes that are required related to communicating with property owners. The last thing I'll mention about this resolution is that since this was not, or this project was not petitioned by the property owners, it's initiated by the city council. It's required under state law that there be a supermajority of the vote. And since there are 6 of you here tonight that are voting members, that means that 5 of you must provide an affirmative vote to move forward.
Questions for Pete or for Todd? Brad and then Emily.
So just to clarify, we are not actually setting any assessments in place at this point in time. Just
Correct. You had a gentleman that said he was being
make it
assessed.
short.
That is not accurate. This does not make an assessment.
Correct. That's what I want to make sure we're clear. So.
Okay. Emily?
Just for procedural understanding, what would happen if we tabled this and discussed it further or, postponed, kick the can down the road to gather more information?
I think it might depend on what level of information that you're looking for. From my perspective, and Pete might be able to address this better than I can, the reason for the timeline is that this meets what we think is the best time for bidding window. It's not great to bid in April or May because contractors get booked up and prices seem to go up. And so our goal would be to have this ready to go for bids as we get into, what is it, Pete?
January, February.
Yeah.
So we would design the project, receive bids in February, and then we would take action to consider any of the other information.
If you are concerned about the overall bid or how something might work, again, this does not make the project be built. There are a number of actions that the council must take before that happens. The staff recommendation, frankly, is to move forward, receive bids, and then you have some solid numbers to work with the property owners on. And then you have some solid numbers to be able to make decisions on what the appropriate balance is about who pays for what, how, and how the policy applies, or where you might wish to deviate from your policy.
Carrie?
Well, and I think the way that I look at the action that we're taking tonight is we're saying that, we've looked at the feasibility study. We know that this road needs to be improved. I think delaying it would increase costs overall, and I would be concerned about that. I think there's still plenty of time to talk about our assessment policy, really understand once we have the numbers, to understand the impact on property owners. But I do believe that this work needs to be done.
Dustin?
Pete, other than Jay who came and spoke, were there any other people who've reached out specifically just opposing the project?
I wouldn't say outright opposed it. There's concerns related to cost and how our policy is implemented. But we followed the policy to the T, and we've been willing, and homeowners have been willing to discuss that with us on a one-to-one basis. So.
And from what I heard tonight and what I heard at the last week's open house is the questions are just who's paying what.
Right.
Where it's not opposed to doing the project, sorry. It's just about equitable disbursement of who's paying.
Correct.
Okay.
I think we have to be careful. Each homeowner probably has their own perspective and how they want to do that. And that's why we have open houses and public hearings and all those things for people to be able to share in multiple formats. Sometimes it's hard to come up here and talk in front of a city council. So that's why we have an open house where it's a little bit more casual and easy, and we try and provide various opportunities for folks. And that will continue as we move forward with this project or other projects that are similar in nature.
Any other questions? No further questions for Todd or for Pete. The resolution we're considering is on page 57 of the packet. Resolution ordering improvement and preparation of plans for Park Row, South 3rd Street to South Washington Avenue Improvement Project. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Brufback.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Ramp.
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpstra.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. The next resolution is on pages 55 and 155 and 156 of the packet, and that resolution calls for retaining Bolton and Menk to provide design services for Park Row South, 3rd Street to South Washington Avenue Improvement Project. Any questions on this resolution? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Ramp.
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpstra.
Aye.
Councilmember Brufback.
Aye.
The resolution is approved.
Thank you.
Thanks. We will move on to our next item of new business, which is the adoption of a resolution designating our 2023 polling places, beginning with the memo on page 158 of the packet.
Mayor, members, this is something that we try and do as a matter of course prior to, or maybe it's during each election year. It's really prior to each election year, but we have an election just about every year, so it seems like it's every year. This designates polling places for the city and then also for the school district as we operate and administer their election as well. There are no significant changes to the polling places that affect specifically the city. However, the school district is looking to change locations from the location that was on Davis Street to Johnson Hall at the fairgrounds off Union. And so that's the significant change that we have as a part of this. We do this to make sure that notification can be provided appropriately, to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to vote at the right location, and make sure that the information is provided. Again, that's the basis for this, and we do this again every year.
Questions for Todd? The resolution designating city and combined school district 508 polling places for 2023 is on page 159 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Ramp.
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpstra.
Aye.
Councilmember Brufback.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Next up, adoption of a resolution authorizing out-of-state travel by council members for attendance at the AAPA Legislative Rally. That's the American Public Power Association.
Mayor, members, this resolution provides for the training or the opportunity that the mayor described in Washington, D.C. We do this a little bit early, but we do that to make sure that we can get as less expensive or least expensive flights that we can, and make sure that we can get rooms at a good rate and all of those kind of things. And so we appreciate the council's cooperation on this. Based on your discussion, council members Ramp and Sharpstrom are designated to go, and Johnson if one of them cannot go. In addition, DeVos would be allowed to go and paid for if he is voted, elected, I guess would be the right term, elected to the APPA Policy Committee. And you've talked about the merits of doing this in the past, at past workshops. If you want to talk about it some more, that's great, but this is the direction that you provided us for who should attend. I think this council and other councils have been great about kind of sharing the opportunity to learn more about American public power at this event, And so from a staff perspective, we think that's great. The resolution articulates this and is what's necessary under the state law and under your policy.
Are there questions for Todd or any past members who would like to speak toward the value they see to the city of St. Peter and their attendance? Emily?
Sure. I was able to attend in 2020 in February, right before everything kind of shut down, and it was just really eye-opening. I found it to be very valuable, and I learned so many things, and probably my favorite part was visiting with the office, the staff, in the, I don't know how to describe it, one of the building that with all the offices where all of your legislators are hard at work, and you're going into the office and you're visiting with their staff. They're very knowledgeable staff, and just getting to learn about how they're advocating for us and how and the things that we were lobbying for. And I just found that to be really valuable, and I would encourage any of you to do it. So Ben and Dustin, have fun.
Anything further, Brad?
Yeah, I just have to echo what Emily said. It's a learning opportunity, and not just with elected officials, but also other municipalities that are similar to St. Peter, particularly other members of SIMPA, to see how their organizations function, and who are these other people that we're working with, that we're partnering with. I think it's incredibly valuable, and then, as Emily said, advocating with our elected officials, items that are of importance with us, whether it be, which doesn't affect St. Peter much, but, power line pole attachments, or, renewable energy issues and the like. So definitely a very valuable thing, I think, for us to always send at least 2 elected officials every year.
Thanks, Brad. Anything further? Hearing no further comments or questions, the resolution authorizing elected official travel is on page 161. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Rand?
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpston?
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat?
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos?
Aye.
Mayor Noel?
Aye. The resolution is approved. Next up, adoption of a resolution approving non-union, non-contract wage increases for 2023.
Mayor and members, the information starts on page 162, and as Mayor Noel indicated, it provides for a number of changes within your pay structure. And so let me go through these just a little bit and hit some of the high points, and then certainly be available for any questions that you may have. First of all, the recommendation from my office is to approve a 4.5% pay modification for those non-union, non-contract, full-time, and for part-time employees, with some exceptions. Those employees, which are primarily seasonal lifeguards, public works folks, recreation leaders, those kind of folks, would not receive the 4.5%. They'd be paid based on the scale that's in that second part of the resolution, if I can use that terminology. All of these changes would be effective on January 1st, 2023. In the past, the council's used 2 primary methodologies related to modifications for wages. This is the one that councils have used the most by far, which is this kind of percentage increase along with anomalies that I list out in here. A couple of things that I want to mention: that you have a number of positions within the city of St. Peter that are what I might consider or would categorize as being city-centric. So as an example, a wastewater operator is very city-centric, although there are some in the private world, like maybe at a paper mill or a milk processing facility at times. Most wastewater operators work for some type of local unit of government, and so it's very city-centric. That's very different than what we might see for truck drivers, who could work in a number of different fields, not just for cities, but in the private sector. So I think that's an important thing to know and think about as we move forward in this. I also want to mention that we see substantial wage pressure in all areas, but in particular in those areas where you have lower waged positions, both in full-time and in part-time, and that's reflected as a part of my recommendation. oftentimes those positions that are of lower pay are both available in local units of government, but are also very transferable in the private sector. And as you know, if you've watched the ads or seen the discussion about inflation, that wages have gone up in those areas substantially. We also see pressure at your higher levels, and we see that pressure in a number of different ways. As I look across the League of Minnesota Cities website, their survey data, the information about openings that are out there, the number of applicants that are for any of these upper level positions, and the amount of pay has grown. So the number of applicants has decreased exponentially over the last 5 to 10 years, and the wages have increased exponentially in those areas. So there are more dollars chasing fewer folks around. Previous city councils, and I believe this city council has at least articulated to me, that it's our goal to try and minimize as we can and as is appropriate turnover, because turnover has a cost. And you, by and large, have a wonderful workforce that works very hard for your community and has lots of expertise in what's going on, not just in your community, but in your fields overall. And so where we can make changes to ensure that we are minimizing the opportunity for turnover, we want to do that. In addition, previous councils have indicated that it is your goal not to hold people hostage. So as an example, just because someone lives here and it's a pain to move, we don't want to pay them less. And then when they decide to retire or leave for some other purpose, we end up paying the replacement a lot more. That's counterproductive. And so we try and avoid that, and that's reflected in the recommendations that you see here. Overall, as you know, within your budget process, we had budgeted just a slight amount over 3.25, or over 3% at about 3.25%. I also budgeted for some of the anomalies that you see that are recommended as a part of this. An additional 1.5% over that number has a cost of about $60,000 to your general fund, and then about $60,000 across your enterprise funds. So that's the financial impact that you would see as a part of this. And I think it's important to understand that, and we want to articulate that clearly so that you know what I'm asking you to do and recommending that you do. And I'll go through, if you want, each and every one of these, or if you want to have questions about certain positions, I'm happy to talk about that. But before I open that up, let me talk about the scales that are included, and I'm kind of going to move the pages here on the screen just for a second. Give me a few moments. So this is the start of where we see scaled positions. And so scaled positions usually don't receive a percentage. We are developing a new scale for them. And what you see as a part of the recommendation here, and the resolution just shows 23, but isn't it, as an example here, recreation leader who's a first-year recreation leader, we're proposing that the pay for that go up $1 per hour to $12.50, from $11.50 to $12.50. So as you know, that's more than 4.5%. This is part of an ongoing process that we really started a couple of years ago in some of these part-time or more seasonal positions that will probably need to go forward based on what we see as competition within the marketplace for these folks to work for you. And so you'll see that in a number of different areas, and I won't go through all of them, but you'll see that in the resolution in 2 distinct columns. You might also note that within Public Works, we see a scale that is bigger, so more steps, more years within that scale. There are 2 primary reasons for that. Part of that is because the competition is different related to some of these. So as an example, although you might find a lifeguard at a hotel pool, not very often in our area, but on occasion, that's a pretty city-centric job. Many of the positions that we see in Public Works, truck driver, landscaper, there's a lot of private sector competition for those positions with those licensing, with those skills, and doing that manual labor. And so again, there's been pressure from outside to ensure that we can hire folks to make these jobs go during the appropriate season. We really count on these positions to make things go within your community, especially during the spring, summer, and early fall. So I wanted to emphasize that and make sure that you were aware of that. The longer timeline within Public Works has as much to do with, in that area, especially with some of the folks that we attract, they generally work for us 5, 6, 7, 10 years, and sometimes a little bit more. Where oftentimes the more rec-based programs, if we can get them for 2 or 3 or 4 years, that is fantastic, and they've been with us a long time. That tends to change over a lot more. So anyway, I think we're addressing that appropriately as well. Again, overall, there continues to be upward pressure within the employment marketplace. More jobs, fewer people. Technical skills are necessary and even more needed as we see this across the board in all levels that you see. Madam Mayor, I could go on for a long time because I spend a lot of time, energy, and effort reviewing some of the data, reviewing ads, working on and reviewing some of the surveys that we're privy to related to pay in other communities or other similarly situated governmental positions. And so I'm happy to discuss that more or talk about any of the anomalies that you might want to discuss.
Let's start with questions. Carrie?
Todd, for some of the rec positions, the lifeguard positions, cashier positions, I'm not, I guess, advocating for a change right now, but I think maybe a deeper dive sometime next year to really look at, does that longevity tier make a difference in terms of, does that entice people to stay? Or is it better to perhaps start at a different rate and maybe have just one other tier for longevity, and looking at the cost of what that turnover is? You know, because I still think we're going to have a really difficult time hiring at these even these increased rates. The other thing I wanted to say is, I imagine that the cashiers we hire at the pool are youth and are paid under minimum wage for 2023 because they're youth. For the first year, $10.50, but might we want to think about increasing that to at least minimum wage?
I can certainly do some more research in that area. I have to tell you that our experience over the last 2 years has been, we've had more than enough cashiers apply, which has been great. Typically what we're seeing are, this is young people's first job. They're 14 years old, maybe 15 years old, and this is their first summer gig. It's really interesting because you bring up a number of great points, and one of the things that I think we see, and I think the data supports really clearly, is that the folks in some of these positions, particularly related to aquatics and lifeguards, they're in it for that experience and they have that training. And so this does make a difference in them returning or not returning, having that ability to go up a little bit of money every year. So that does make a difference. But I think each year, the rate of change has been exponential in how we review who's applying, how many are applying. And so
And
every
how long
year's,
people stay.
right, every
So
year is a
that
new
changes.
year. So I think we're learning every year for sure.
Yeah, I think we should keep an eye, well,
Yeah.
I know you are, but looking at turnover and
Yep.
how we might need to rethink these longevity tiers as time goes on, because we know that this is going to continue into the future.
Yeah.
So right now, we're not hurting for cashiers at $10.50. If we hired someone who was 18, which would be very unlikely, I'm assuming we'd pay them for the first year minimum wage at $10.59.
That's correct. Yeah, that's how this works.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ben?
Do we do any callbacks on those folks that worked for us last year? Do we call them this year? Try and
Yes.
give them kind of, hey, we're hiring again?
Yeah, so let me broaden the discussion just a little bit. So this not only relates to rec programs, but folks that work seasonally at Public Works. So typically in January or February, we're sending out a letter to the folks that performed well and saying, you know, job openings are going to occur, and oh, by the way, the council approved a better wage, and we encourage them to apply. In fact, we have a more streamlined process for them to apply if they are previous employees than if they have never worked for us in the past. So we do have a process for that. It generally kicks off in late January, the beginning of February, because our typical timeline for start of hire process is the end of February, beginning of March. Great question though, but that's how we handle it.
Any questions? I have a question, Todd. Do we have the latitude to recognize years of service somewhere else? Like if we had somebody come in who'd been a lifeguard for 2 years at another location, would they still come in at the year one wage, or would we recognize their service elsewhere?
So it would depend on what their certification is. I would tell you that prior to 2 years ago, we did not recognize that. But 2 years ago, we started recognizing those opportunities. I'm trying to think if we've had that happen recently. Maybe once over the past couple of years, but yeah.
Not common, but
Correct.
can happen. Okay. Any further questions? All right. Let's see. The resolution establishing 2023 wages for non-union, non-contract employees begins on page 169 and goes through page 171 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Ray?
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpstra?
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat?
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos?
Aye.
Mayor Noel?
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Our last item of new business is the adoption of a resolution approving a tobacco license application.
So Mayor and members, this is for Brittany Brown, who is the owner of Healing Harvest. This is based on the type of products that she sells, and some of them fall within your ordinance relative to whether they need licensure or not. So I stopped in to visit with Brittany, and she's been kind enough to fill out the application. As you know, we would not recommend approval if they did not meet the background check requirements, and we see nothing here that would prohibit her from having a license. So the resolution is included in your packet on page 173 for Healing Harvest.
Questions for Todd? Brad?
I'm just gonna make a note that I'm going to abstain because for personal reasons, I'm not in favor of the expansion of tobacco. Last year, we had a long conversation on this, and so I will not be, technically, we have to pass it, but I'm not gonna vote in favor of it. So.
All right. Any other, Emily?
Just to maybe clarify for Brad, my understanding is there is no tobacco. She doesn't sell tobacco. It's just the type of license because of the type of product? Or am I wrong about that?
So let me provide clarification on that. She sells some types of tobacco that are infused with cannabinoids.
Thank you. I didn't know that.
Any additional questions for Todd? Hearing no further questions, the resolution approving the new business license is on page 173 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Sharpstra?
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat?
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos?
Abstain.
Mayor Noel?
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Ray?
Aye.
The resolution is approved. We will move on to reports. First up, report by the mayor. I think you've all heard me talk enough tonight. It's our last meeting of the year, however, so I will wish everybody a happy new year and look forward to working with you all in 2023. We'll move right along to council members. Are there any council members who'd like to make a report? Brad?
So I'd just like to make a report. Basically, this weekend, Dancers of Mankato Ballet Company entertained audiences for 6 shows at MSU in their annual performance of the timeless classic, The Nutcracker. I can tell you the performances were well attended by members of the St. Peter community, including at least 4 city council members, Southside represent, the mayor, and also Tony behind the camera. But the biggest reason why I bring this up is St. Peter students make up a large contingent of the dancers at Mankato Ballet Company, and once again filled prominent roles in this year's cast. St. Peter students have a history of finding prominent roles, not just in Nutcracker, but other performances. These young ladies and gentlemen, including seniors Alexa Rosbach and Elodie DeVos, spend countless hours each fall rehearsing for their roles while having spent years training to get to this point. I would like to first thank the Mankato Ballet Company for the opportunities they provide our students, and most importantly, thank our local dancers for representing our community so well.
Thanks, Brad. It was great to see a lot of familiar faces on stage and in the audience. I'm biased, but I think we have amazing young people in St. Peter, all above average. Anybody else with a report to make tonight? Then we will turn it over to Todd.
Madam Mayor, I will follow your lead and keep my remarks to 0.
All right. On that note, we will.
This is shocking.
Merry Christmas.
Are you feeling okay?
All right. How about a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned.
Hey, I did bring a few treats, so if you don't eat them, I will be sorely disappointed. If you don't at least have, that's fantastic. I appreciate the effort.
Something-
That's